Okay, joining me now is Sky News Senior Reporter Cameron Reddin. Cam, great to see you. Before we move on to other topics, what's been the reaction to the PM's comments on keeping the identity of that former politician quiet?
Yeah, there's a lot of anger about this, Erin, and it goes across both sides of the aisle, especially from former MPs who are saying, hey, you've thrown out a wide net here. Should every former MP have to come out and say, it's not me, it's not me? And the fact of keeping this quiet has caused quite a bit of anger as well within some, including former senior members of the public service who've spoken to Sky News, saying that if you're going to just drop the grenade and then walk away without naming this person, that it may unfairly besmirch so many people. And obviously that gives itself to speculation that then sets the rumour mill wild about who this may or may not have been, particularly given that the threat of this person, as Mike Burgess has said, has now been neutralised. There's no longer a security threat attached with this person. You mentioned there the comments by the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, the opposition leader Peter Dutton, both yesterday and today, also flagging his concerns that simply not naming this person has a risk of besmirching many innocent people. He did, though, note today later on that he respects Mike Burgess's judgment on this, and he believes that if it's his view that it's best not to name this person, that also needs to be respected.
Renewed deal with Australian news media organisations to pay for news content. This is huge. Can you explain to Australians why this matters, not just to media organisations like us, but to them? Yeah, the intricacies of this are a little complex around the legislative arms, if you like, that the government has to deal with. But it all boils down to a very simple concept, Erin, which is getting paid a fair amount for the work that you do. Whether you're a baker or a butcher or a news organisation, that is the same principle that this boils down to. And this decision today is being described by Stephen Jones, the Assistant Treasurer, and also the Communications Minister, Michelle Rowland, as a threat to the viability of Australian journalism, a decision by Meta, Facebook's parent company, to essentially not pay a fee that it currently does to display news items on its service. Here's a little of the government's response to that decision today.
The government takes the view that this is a dereliction of its responsibility to Australia, in particular its contribution to the viability of journalism and news media content in Australia. We want to make it quite clear that we're backing Australian journalism.
The announcement by Meta today is an abrogation of responsibility to Australia's news media sector. Australian journalists provide one of the most important public goods in our democracy.
So at the moment, when these deals expire in the middle of this year, Facebook is saying it won't do what it did in 2021, which was temporarily block access to news on Facebook. Instead, it still wants to host news articles. In other words, you'll still be able to theoretically access news. Is that sustainable without paying for it, Erin, is a big question.
Well, it's not fair, is it? It's utterly ridiculous. Yeah. These are the same companies who refuse to take any responsibility for the safety of their users, and now they don't want to pay for the content. Cam, forgive me for coming in. I've just got a couple of reactions from two of the big media bosses in the country. Ben English from the Daily Telegraph has said it's extremely disappointing that a company with a net worth greater than a dozen small nations is too stingy to pay for content that helps drive its gigantic profits in Australia. It demonstrates the scant regard this California behemoth has for journalism and, more broadly, the Australian public. And I'll bring you just a quick reaction as well from Channel 7 CEO James Warburton, who says Meta needs to be designated. This case has not only been made but proven, and we welcome the government's reaction to ensure their designation. Now, I had to look up what that meant, and it means basically the government has to force them to mediate. It is then binding. But yes. OK, let's move on to the next story, Cam. The Communications Minister also revealed in her address today that a person has died as a result of a nationwide Telstra outage this morning. This is awful.
Yeah, it is, Erin, and it's worth noting too that this wasn't the same sort of scale of an incident we saw, for example, with Optus at the end of last year, but it was a technical incident that Telstra has apologised to, which led to a bit over 100 calls in Victoria being delayed when they were attempting to get through to 000. There were some issues with connection, and during all of that, in amongst those calls being delayed or issues with them, sadly, one person who was trying to access an ambulance has passed away. There's an investigation going on in terms of trying to establish just the extent of whether that delay contributed to that person passing away. ACMA, the media authority, is also being involved in investigating this. Of course, Telstra so often the first port of call technically of where these calls go on their route to getting to emergency services. So very sad and multiple investigations now underway too.
No, it is absolutely. Cam, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.